Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode on the TMJ podcast. Today we are speaking with Zuhra Akhtar, who is a student at Florida International University and also the co-president of the Students for Justice in Palestine there. Zuhra will be speaking to us about the intense backlash students across U.S. campuses have been facing for exercising their free speech rights with regards to the war in Palestine. Zuhra, thank you again for giving your time to me. I really am thankful that you were able to make time to speak with us. One thing I want to delve into right off the bat, you guys have been one of the busiest SJPs in the country, among many others who have really taken the spotlight when it comes to activism and speaking out about Palestine and holding protests and speaking to university leadership, attending meetings. And I think that's really important to speak about because one of the things we sometimes miss when it comes to advocacy for Palestine is that a lot of times university students are really at the forefront of what's happening. What has the stage looked like for you guys, and how has it all been unfolding for you?
So we started off, I guess, not being taken seriously. For a lot of what we saw from administration, they kind of thought we would die down. But eventually, we started seeing greater levels of repression. We started seeing more cops, we started seeing more aggression, we started seeing state troopers coming on our campus, and eventually, we kind of see this sort of escalation towards a point where we're treated kind of like hostile agents. But that means that we're doing something, because when the people in power, they get scared, that's when they start clamping down. I think that kind of was set off by last semester's disruption. They saw that we weren't afraid to get in their faces and yell. And because of that, they kind of just doubled down on their stances. In terms of our resolutions and things like that, they have been either dismissed or painted hostily by university administration, which is, again, what we expected. But it's not something that it's not going to be easy to overcome, but we have a very dedicated base who is willing to do what we have to do.
Right. And that's really, really important that you say that. I've also heard that you've even had members arrested. And as you're saying, these police are dealing quite, I would say, harshly with students who are essentially only exercising their free speech rights. How has that looked like for you as the co-president when you are witnessing all of this happen? What are your thoughts on that?
Again, I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed, of course, because I don't want the students, of course, we don't want any student being arrested. But
Right.
I'm also not surprised. We saw how aggressive the cops were. The fact is that,
Right.
them pressing felony charges on a student it's absolutely insane. A student protesting who, from what we've seen, didn't really do much. It's absolutely ridiculous. It is worrisome in terms of the financial burden they'll put on us, that I have to admit that. But in terms of the fear of protesting, I don't think it makes a big difference. I think people see that and they want to do more because, they see the level of repression going in and they realize that they can't sit silent.
Have your members expressed more support for all of this ever since seeing all of the backlash that they're facing, or has it, kind of made them fearful or scared? Especially because I know a lot of students, because of participating in these events, are unfortunately facing consequences from university leadership, whether it has to do with their classes or I've heard of students being put on lists. We have the Canary mission. There's a lot of things that students are essentially scared because it has to do with their careers now. Have you kind of spoken to students or gotten feedback about what they're feeling when it comes to seeing university leadership react in this way?
Absolutely. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's basically a bill being passed that kind of like restricts financial aid to pro-Palestine students, right? And so for a lot of
Right.
students, they were a little scared because financial aid is what brings us here, right? But then again, after this is all passed, after this is discussed, we saw incredible turnout at our protests still. We see people who are still coming out regardless of the fear tactics that are being used because people
Right.
understand that these are means of control. And if we let them control us, it'll just keep going further. So in terms of student engagement, I'd like to say, we have a very diverse campus. And because of that, we see more support than we do, opposition.
And so would you say that in addition to members from the SJP or others who joined protests, have you seen support or backlash that really stood out to you from campus leadership or even faculty and staff?
So, of course, there's been a lot of backlash. There has been a lot. And I mean, what stands out to me is that we have opposition people. You have, opposition groups and people who say things about us who will do things worse than we do. And they're not facing any consequences. They stand there and they insult us and they say nasty things. The university president, the university board of trustees will openly defame us and mock us. And again, we
Wow.
could expect it, but it's just very disheartening to see, considering the fact that we're paying to be here. But in
Right.
terms of the student body, there's a very clear divide, and it's a very clear majority that kind of stands with us. We see this
Right.
in our events. When we table, we have like a huge amount of people coming out, and it's great to
Right.
see.
Absolutely. And you say you have, for example, other groups that come and say, worse things about, for example, the students who speak out about Palestine and they are not faced with any backlash. Have you brought this up to like the stark hypocrisy where a certain group of students are able to exercise their free speech and saying hate words, hate phrases to other students who are also exercising their free speech? Has that hypocrisy awakened anyone? Has it become something that people are realizing, or is it just something that everyone's just shoving under the carpet and ignoring?
So our members definitely talk about it, and it makes them angry and it makes them more motivated to do things. And we see that, right? We actually recently had a meeting with the president of the university, where we
Mm-hmm.
brought this up, and it was basically just dismissed as, there are certain students who are following rules and certain students who aren't, right? So that was
Right.
what that was brought up. But it's not something that we did not expect. It's just a matter of understanding that those who are benefiting from this will never turn against the system. But when it comes to the
Right.
students, you see a lot of students being like, yo, what's going on, right? And because they see that, they learn more. They try to learn more. They try to understand more.
Absolutely. And has your SJP taken any action, whether legal action or otherwise, especially because right now the issue of free speech has taken center stage with universities, especially with regards to advocacy and student activism in relation to Palestine. Universities have always kind of been a hotspot for this specific constitutional right, especially when it comes to identifying the lines and boundaries between hate speech and free speech. But one thing that remains, no matter what, is that students have an undeniable right, even just as, people who live in the United States, to exercise their free speech, even if it means they're saying things that are uncomfortable to an audience that is a part of the status quo. Have you guys considered any legal action or anything with regards to protecting your free speech rights that you think could be a way to move forward with this?
We have considered certain routes. I can't comment on anything else, but there are things that we have considered and are exploring. We do plan to have a Know Your Rights workshop. We have not yet because we've had events every single week. But we do plan to have something to kind of just make sure students know what they're getting into, know what's going on, and who to call when something happens. So we do plan on prepping our students in that regard. And outside of that, we do have a legal team that is waiting and ready for us whenever we need them.
And kind of to wrap up the conversation, I really want to make it a little bit of a bigger picture. We discussed how universities across the US have really been kind of at the forefront, and students have been at the forefront of all of this. What role do you think students in universities in the West have when it comes to their advocacy, and what kind of impact do you foresee it having?
I mean, if it wasn't so impactful, they wouldn't be clapping down on us. Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't
Right.
be passing all these bills and having all these hearings if it wasn't such a big deal. And that's how we know we're doing something, because they're getting so scared. In terms of, the push for divestment, right? We see some universities already managed to establish that, which is absolutely amazing, right? That's
Right.
scaring the ruling class. It's scaring them. And, if people were to be fully educated on the topic, I feel like there's going to be a lot of longevity in this, and we will see long-term results. It's not going to be easy. Nothing worth having has been easy. South Africa divestment from there,
100%.
when they were, in their apartheid era, it took a while, but it was done. And to say that, it would be like a short-term thing, I don't think so. I disagree. I think especially now with the advent of social media, people are a lot more aware of what's going on. And because of that, they feel like they can't just sit quietly.
And one last question. If you could send a message, I know you guys have been quite vocal in speaking to university leadership, but if you had one message that you wanted to share with the FIU administration, what would that be?
Our tuition pays your salaries. So the least you could do is listen to us. That's our message. The least you could do is listen to us and what we have to say. And historically, we've seen this pattern where everybody beats the drum of war, and then 10 years later, we're like, oh, that was wrong. We can't make that same mistake. We can't afford to let them make that same mistake.
100%. And what methods do you think that students maybe in other universities that are thinking about continuing this advocacy, what message could you have for them in terms of continuing that advocacy and not being scared of repercussions or the backlash they may face?
At the end of the day, and the way I see it is that we may face some consequences. Yes, right? We might. But staying silent costs people their lives. We could choose to protect ourselves and live in fear for the rest of our lives, or we could say something now and pave the way for the people behind us. 20 years ago, people like you and me wouldn't have been able to walk around as we are with our headscarves. But it's because of the women who
100%.
pushed to go forward and to be there, obviously and publicly, that we're able to do as we are. Sometimes it takes that little bit of bravery to keep pushing and inspire the people after us.
100%. Well, thank you again, Zohra, for your time. I really appreciate it. It's really inspiring to see everything that your SJP is doing. And we pray that hopefully that advocacy continues to a point where it really does make that lasting change we're all looking for.
Inshallah, inshallah.